Do we have free will? Now, it absolutely feels like we have free will. Every day I wake up and I choose between two different options for breakfast, right? Toast or eggs. I choose the toast. I go to the store every day and I pick between all these different options. I'm presented with all these options and I choose one. And the one I desire. I'm freely choosing what I desire to choose. I am choosing to make this video right now. Every word I'm telling you is something I'm choosing to say. There's nobody stopping me. There's no puppeteer in the clouds pulling the strings. I'm freely making these choices. At least it seems that way. But this issue is a bit complex. When you start diving deeper into what free will is and what it means, a lot of questions arise. And the first question is, what is free will, right? How do you define that? And the typical definition of free will is the ability to act without constraint. Now, we have to ask ourselves as well, why do we choose things, right? Why do I choose things with my freedom? Well, the reason why is because we desire those things. Everything I choose is something I desire to choose. That's freedom. I mean, otherwise it's not free, right? Because you're being forced to, or somebody's telling you to do it, right? So I'm choosing things that I desire to choose, and that's freedom. But we have to ask the next question here, right? The next question is, what causes those desires in the first place, right? Who's controlling the desire for that toast instead of the eggs, right? Am I controlling the desire for that toast? No, I'm not controlling the desire. I don't control what I want. I might control, eating the toast. I might control that action. But I'm not controlling the desire to have the toast in the first place. And that's where the problem starts. Because look, you're either doing things because you want to do them, or you're forced to do them, or you're influenced to do them. So there's no in between there, right? You can't just be, half determined, half free. That doesn't make any sense. So it's got to be the case that if my desires are not free, then everything I'm doing isn't free, because they're being influenced by the brain, which is causing those desires in the first place. The brain is determining what I desire. I don't control what happens in my brain. I don't control those synapses in the brain occurring at all. Now you might be saying, well, maybe we don't control our desires, Mike, but we do control our impulses, right? If I have an impulse to jump into a puddle, for example, I'm stopping myself from doing that, right? I can say, hey, don't jump in that puddle. I can control my impulses. There's the freedom. But the same question remains, right? We ask ourselves again, what caused that impulse control in the first place? We can answer that question again by saying, yeah, it's not me freely choosing to stop going into the puddle. It's also determined by the brain that I stop doing that. Or another part of the brain that says, hey, don't do that, right? And that's what neuroscience is pretty much telling us today, that our choices that we choose in our daily lives, everything we do, is determined by the brain ultimately. And there were some great studies on this, such as Benjamin Libet's, where he showed that people's decisions were caused seconds before by the brain, before they even were aware of making that decision. So before we're aware of making a choice, the brain's already active and actively deciding what we do. So again, this all ties back to how the brain operates. Another example is Charles Whitman, who was a mass unaliver in the 1960s. And for years and years, he had these terrible headaches, and he also had these weird impulses where he'd be very angry and violent, and it caused him to eventually mass unalive people. But he would make these notes before he did that, and ultimately committed suicide. But before he did all that, he would make notes and talk to doctors and write journal entries about his condition. He was wondering why he was doing this. And he suspected that there was a tumor in his brain. He suspected there was something wrong with his brain. And after he died, the doctors looked and found a tumor right near the amygdala, which they think was pressing upon the amygdala and causing him to be more anxious and fearful. And so that's another case where, and there's many other cases of this, where people's actions and behaviors are largely determined and influenced by the brain. Another reason to think that this is the case is the fact that most of our actions in our daily lives are subconsciously being made. Like, breathing. I'm not thinking about breathing. I'm just doing that subconsciously. I'm not thinking much when I'm showering or when I'm doing this thing. I'm just kind of like in zombie mode, just going through the motions because my brain is just doing those things. And my brain is just telling my body to do those things. So there's a very small sliver of our lives that are really conscious. And if that's the case, then where's the room for freedom here in all this, right? And on a larger scale of this, imagine the fact that with the laws of physics, not just our brains are being determined by those electrochemical processes happening there, but every physical process is governed by the laws of physics. So on a full universe scale, we find that every particle, right? If you knew the trajectories of every particle in motion, if you knew the metrics of every single atom and electron in the universe, you can predict and calculate where that particle would end up, right? You could predict their motions through time and space. And imagine playing the whole universe back like a movie. If you played it over again, it would be the same way it is now. So that's another reason to think that the universe is determined to be the way it is. Now, another part of this is the sense of the self. Oftentimes when we talk about free will, we say, I am doing something. I choose to do something. But what do we really mean by I? Right? What is the I here? And this is a bit complicated and kind of scary, but it could be that the self is an illusion in itself. In other words, what sustains me isn't this permanent thing. There's no central thing that makes me occur, right? I'm just a system of particles flowing through space and time temporarily this way. And the emergent phenomenon would be the self. In other words, we are a constantly changing system. Every day you eat, you consume food, your cells are dying, your cells are leaving your system, new cells are being produced in your body, to the point where every single one of your cells is eventually a new one. So there's no I-ness that's tethered to something, real in the universe, right? The I-ness, the me-ness, right? When I say the me, there is no such particle that you can point to, right? It's kind of this emergent phenomenon of the brain, the collective of what the brain is doing, right? Kind of like life. In terms of life, it's not a single particle that makes you alive. There's no particle of life, right? What makes you alive is the sum total of all those processes happening in your body. So just like that, just as life is emergent of molecules, so is I-ness, right? It's an emergent property of matter. So the self may be just an illusion. And when we talk about me choosing something, we're not really talking about one permanent entity that's unchanging. We're talking about this emergent phenomenon that we call the self, right? It's just a label. And that system, that selfness is being sustained by what the brain's doing over time. So if you subscribe to the laws of physics, we're left with this reductionist view where everything's reduced to the physical. And we are kind of just these collections of particles that are just flowing downstream of this river that's out of our control. We're just going with the flow, literally, and there's no freedom here. We're purely deterministic, right? So in this sense, in my position is that hard determinism is true, and that we are just acting out things according to the laws of physics, and we don't have any freedom at all. Everything I think is determined by external influences. Everything I learn is influenced by external influences that I don't control. I don't control my environment, where I grew up. I don't control where I was born. I didn't control any of that. So we're left with this reductionist view. Now, sometimes people will say that this view is forgetting quantum mechanics. You're forgetting that inherent to nature itself, according to quantum mechanics, there is uncertainty here. There's probability here. And therefore, there could be room for freedom here in this sense. But let's just say there is this kind of quantum randomness happening in the universe. Is randomness controlled? No. Do we control the probability of quantum uncertainty? No, we don't control that either. Where is the control happening here, even if we subscribe to the quantum mechanic view of the world? In other words, even if I grant you that every action I do is random, according to quantum mechanics, or it's probabilistic, according to quantum mechanics, there's nothing I'm controlling. I'm not controlling the laws of quantum mechanics. No, the laws of quantum mechanics are controlling me. So there's still no room for freedom, even given a pure random world or a purely, indeterministic world or a probabilistic world. So that's why I'm still skeptical that free will can be a tangible thing. And my position is, it doesn't even make sense really to talk about me having free will in any objective sense. For all intents and purposes, we feel like we have free will, we act as if we have free will, we behave this way, and we're just left with this technicality of, yeah, we don't have free will, but we act as if we do. And some people get concerned about this when I say this. They say, well, Mike, if we don't have free will, then how do you hold people responsible for their actions? That this means that the criminal who causes crime isn't responsible because that was just them abiding the laws of physics. They have no choice in the matter. And that would be a correct assessment that, yes, ultimately speaking, we don't have freedom in this picture, and responsibility is ultimately illusory. It's just something we place on people because it's subjective to think that this person is doing wrong, so let's punish that person. But even on a more pragmatic level, of course we'd want to punish those who do wrong, regardless if we have free will or not, because we want that action to stop. We want to prevent that action from occurring again in our society, right? So the person who causes death or violence in our world, we want to prevent those people from doing that again. So we put them in jail, in prison. Now, you can argue whether or not, this person was ultimately responsible, but why does that matter when that person is a danger to society? Get him out of his society, right? I think that makes it okay. I mean, here's another example. Imagine if I built a robot. I was a mad scientist and I developed a robot who was programmed with a weapon to kill and murder people. I send the robot out and this robot continues going on a rampage. And would it make sense for somebody on the street to say, oh, well, that robot was determined. He was programmed to do that. So might as well just let him continue the rampage. No, that's absurd. It's absurd to think that we just let people do what they do without any prevention because they were determined to do that. No, we want to prevent bad actions. So it makes good sense to hold people responsible in some way, even though it's not objectively the case that they are ultimately responsible, right? It wouldn't be fruitful for us to act as if we are determined fully. Like, imagine if I go to the restaurant every time and I tell the waiter, get me whatever the laws of physics dictates me getting. That's not something that would make practical sense in our society, right? So we uphold the illusion for the sake of sanity because our brains did not evolve to, consider all these technicalities about how the universe operates. We evolved to just, think that we are free, and for all intents and purposes, so be it. I act that way. I don't have a choice otherwise. And if this still concerns you, think about it this way. There is this positive side to recognizing that we are determined and that we don't have free will. Back in the day, if your child has schizophrenia, for example, and you went to see doctors, the doctors would blame the parent on the schizophrenic child, right? Because they didn't know what was happening, right? They would blame the child, oh, you were mistreating them, or what did you do to them? Well, now we have a better understanding because of embracing this deterministic picture of the world where it's the brain controlling what we do. Well, now we have an entire field of science dedicated to recognizing illnesses in people, mental illness in people, and recognizing that, hey, they're not at fault there, and let's give them medication to fix it, perhaps. So it's helping us understand each other more, right? Collectively, we're just people. And I think that actually, viewing the world deterministically helps you understand each other more and who we are and why we behave the way we do and why we believe the things we do. And that, I think, helps us become better people in the end. So, hope this helped you guys. And I was determined to say that. And now I'm determined to end the video.